Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where I look at every classic Doctor Who story, plus a bunch of Big Finish audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. Now, before we begin, I would just like to make sure everyone understands that because in 2019, YouTube was caught data mining the information of underage users, they implemented new policy meant to dodge responsibility and scapegoat creators, honestly. I have to make sure everyone understands that this video is not meant for children. It's not targeted towards kids. It's not aimed at kids. Doctor Who is a family show that, of course, kids can watch and enjoy. But this video, as with all the videos on my channel, are looking at it from an adult perspective. So viewer discretion is advised. But it's the 23rd, I cannot remember the date, of September 2020, and we are starting a look basically at the first in a small run of Fifth Doctor stories, where the Fifth Doctor is traveling alone, starting with And You Will Obey Me, Part 1. Now, And You Will Obey Me is a main range story from 2016, from basically the Big Finish always do the trilogies, where it's 1 for 5, 1 for 6, 1 for 7, and then one where all three each get a story. This is that for the start of that trilogy with the Fifth Doctor. The Fifth Doctor as... as played by Peter Davison, and traveling essentially after the Awakening. He takes his TARDIS, gets Will Chandler back home, and then basically gets a message sent out from the TARDIS of the Master. And that's sort of all preamble, which is actually really, really exciting. It's exciting preamble because the Doctor basically gets to be, he basically finds out, so the Master might actually be dead in this village of Hexford in 2016. So you have that as our starting point for the story, that the Master might be dead. So, of course, the Doctor goes to investigate, finds his TARDIS being put up for auction, and that's our first scene. And the first scene is actually really, really good. Alan Barnes wrote this story, and he wrote, honestly, a really, really witty script, a script that just sort of pops off the page in a lot of ways. Mainly because, the Doctor auctions for the clock, and basically pulls a point where he starts just... It's basically I have to get this clock, so I'm basically going to have this, have this whole idea of you have this whole idea of basically the Doctor, driving up the price so he doesn't actually get it. And he meets up with this woman, and they basically both try to find essentially the new owner of this cottage. This woman is basically buying the cottage that the Master lived in. She happened to find the key behind like a brick somewhere, which is again is a very, very interesting idea, a very very interesting story to do something like this, where that is sort of the plot we're going for. We don't entirely get all of the crazy stuff with the Master, where the Master, we don't have the Master show up in this episode. But we also have a bunch of other people from this village who kind of congregate onto this point, onto this cottage, where the Master is dead and buried, and the Doctor is rightly paranoid that the Master is still alive somehow, and you really, really get a solid sense that while the Doctor is paranoid here, he isn't necessarily wrong. This is a point where you have where you have a character who's like, okay, here's this this interesting interesting sort of where you get everything as it kind of can be, and you have the characters playing around and things being the stuff, while there are basically a bunch of aliens that come to this village and are essentially coming to kill the Master, convinced that the Master is still alive and still out there, which is probably right. The Master's on the cover of this story. It's not trying to be a twist. It's sort of trying to be a, where's the Master hiding? Because at the scene at the grave, you have the implication that that the Doctor knows the Master's still alive, that the grave is actually empty, making for a nice little twist. A bunch of nice little twists and ideas that the story is playing around with. Something that I think actually is has done a really, really good job. I mean, you have these aliens coming and they cause some basically calamity because they're like, they're trying to kill the Master, and the big cliffhanger is basically everyone is getting shot at by these aliens, because the aliens have a staser, somehow managed to get a staser off of Gallifrey. There is, there's the whole, okay, so there's a staser being stolen. So a bunch of things are going on. I will say it's not perfect. The aliens are generic, and there's a bit of, we're kind of waiting for the Master to show up, especially because this is the Master as played by Jeffrey Beavers, who is, one of those characters where one of those actors who you just where you get to see who you get to see him as such a good version of the character, that I really, really love. There's it's all very it's all very, very interesting and very, very cool, but it's just kind of a little dull. So overall, I'm going to give part 1 of And You Will Obey Me an 8 out of 10. Alright, it is the 24th of September 2020. I just finished listening to part 2 of And You Will Obey Me. This second episode is great. They are they're both really, really solid. There is a lot being done here that is really, really good. I love a lot of the ideas being played with, mainly because there's this big reveal halfway through. I think we're at the halfway point. There's this really nice big reveal, basically where it's revealed that basically all these people, all these kids, one, they're not kids, they're actually in their 40s and haven't aged since 1984, when they were essentially taken under the wing of the Master. So they were all taken under the wing of the Master, and the Master kind of gave them what they want. Like, Michael Masterson isn't the Master, but is like an actual person, which is just one of those things where you don't get to see everything as it stands. It's such a good twist, because it makes you really think like, okay, a lot of the stuff that was happening has now sort of changed its context, which is a good thing. I like when stories go in and decide, yes, let's change the context. Let's make things different and make things interesting. Like there is that good sense of sort of wonder here. Like everything that is sort of come around. And you have sort of the question, it's like, wait, the doctor kind of lampshades things like, wait, you're from you're all from 1984. I just came from 1984, and they're all friends who I guess were kicked off of a bus, and eventually encountered the Master. Like there's this character called Janine who tries to hypnotize the Doctor. When that doesn't work because it's the Doctor, he's kind of immune from hypnosis. She basically, that I guess tries to, not really seduce him, but it's sort of oh, I am just so scared. Why won't you, please help me, Doctor? Essentially that sort of a performance, which is interesting. You also have Michael Masterson, who is actually a character who is, again, also interesting because he's sort of the one who I guess seems to go against the grain, and not want anything, which is really, really interesting. Like, he seems to be self-aware that this is kind of an evil situation, and he also seems to know the Doctor, which is, again, there's a lot of interesting stuff here, and a lot of intrigue, that I think just really, really works to make things, come together and basically be like, okay, we've got an interesting plot, we've got some interesting characters. What else can we do to make this work? And part of that is just, making it something so different. Now you also have, you also have this character, oh God, what's her name? It's Alex. It's this. It's a character who the Doctor, is sort of pseudo companion with. Or no, it's Annie, not Alex. Alex is something different. Annie, who is, was sort of just, at the auction. She's revealed to actually be an agent for MI5 and sort of almost has this split personality, which I think is really, really interesting. It's an interesting split personality because it's like, oh, she's, she has, nice Annie and bad Annie, which is just, such a different, it's this very, very different, it's this very, very different sort of characterization, for someone who is, part of is, a lot of it's like, the whole thing is part of MI5, and basically can switch at the drop of a hat to being good, from being good to being bad, which is, again, all very, very interesting, all very, all a very, very different sort of characterization because of what she sort of does. She's showing her true colors. Like she kills two people in cold blood here, and is chasing the Doctor, and even the sort of Dragon Master aliens, which are they're almost right out of a comic book, which is kind of fitting because Alan Barnes got his start in the Doctor Who comics. So that's kind of something to be expected, but not necessarily completely known about. Things like that are really, really interesting just to see how they play out. The Mayfly lies and the Doctor tries to get from them. So you have a bunch of different threads coming together, and you actually hear a little bit of the Master here. And of course, Geoffrey Beevers, even though he gets like one line, he sells that one like he sells that one line. It's just such a good. Again, there's so much good pacing here that you really get a good sense of here's what the story is trying to do. Meaning it's a good episode. So it's one of those stories where you have a lot of twists coming. It's just a really, really solid entry. And we're only halfway through. So overall, I'm going to have to give part 2 of And You Will Obey Me a 9 out of 10. Okay, it is the 25th of September, 2020. I just finished listening to part 3 of And You Will Obey Me. This third episode is essentially the episode where a lot of the backstory and explanation comes in. And honestly, I really, really like it. It does a really, really good job of being like, okay, here are some twists. Here are a couple of basically twists and things that make you question your sort of your what's on the toes. Keeps you on your toes, and you basically get the idea here, that that is played around with. Basically that this is a story all where the characters kind of are kind of just, you're just kind of seeing what the backstory is, which means this is just an exposition heavy story, which isn't bad, because Alan Barnes' script, exposition wise, is actually really good. I really was enjoying a lot of what Barnes did, specifically with with the characters, and with just about with everything that the story can do, not necessarily that it does do, but it is a thing where it is a story where you get to see essentially all of this stuff that this story does kind of explained here. Like, you have the reveal that Michael Masterson isn't dead and is actually a different person, and is actually one of the few people of this, like, these children of the Master who are given his powers, and you see why they were given his powers, which makes it's an interesting explanation. The whole idea is that the Master was basically dying, and basically dying meant that he needed to use basically these people, these children, as basically a way that that he can survive, that he can get everything, sort of brought together to to a conclusion where he is, in fact, the master. He is evil. He is, you will obey him. The whole idea, he tricked these people into basically thinking he was going to give them their desires, and obviously he didn't, and they basically stole, essentially a nuclear warhead for him, creating, a bunch of different little things where you see the master just as a character, as not kind of being, not being the character that you think of him when you think of the master. He's manipulative, and Jeffrey Beavers gives such a great performance here. You see just a lot of what of basically what the story does, what it can be, what it can do. It's a very different story because of that. You don't entirely see everything as it stands, but it's playing the role as different, and as almost sort of new, and you have some really big connections to The Awakening. Like, this episode completely establishes that, this takes place after The Awakening. Jane Hampton, the character from The Awakening, gets mentioned as the school teacher of Michael, and you basically have the idea, this whole twist, that they're not coming to sort of try to revive the master. They're coming because they kind of want to kill him, which I think is actually a fascinating and a really, really solid twist on the story to do with these characters, where it's like, okay, as a twist, they actually just they want to, see the master dead. It's a new twist, and it's a different twist, and I think it's just a really, really good way of telling sort of what what the story can be, what it can do, who these characters are. It makes for something a bit more interesting, and I really, really do enjoy that's what the story's doing. So you see just a different sort of thing. So it creates just such a different story and a different story type. So overall, I'm going to give part 3 of. And there are a couple of flaws. The exposition is kind of slows it down, but it's still a great episode. And one that I highly recommend. So overall, I'm going to give part 3 of And You Will Obey Me an 8 out of 10. Alright, it is the 26th of September 2020. I just finished listening to part 4 of And You Will Obey Me, final part. And the part where Jeffrey Beavers, as the master, actually shines a lot. Mainly because he plays the master here in a vein that is just a bit more similar to Peter Pratt in The Deadly Assassin. The master here is desperate, trying to survive, is essentially stuck in a complete little sort of thing. There is these whole this whole idea and this whole build up of the story to basically having the Doctor, obviously beat him, and as the big thing, which is great. I like that the characters win in the end, and it's a great ending. But you just really get that idea of desperation that you don't particularly get from, say, other stories. You have the entire story basically all being, again, built around the Master, being destroyed, and you have this big reveal that Annie, who was, we knew was secret, we knew at least was a little secretly morally dubious, to say the least, was in fact working for her own ends. Now we get the reveal that she was an alien, which that's great, and you have basically the four children of the Master all sort of reconciling with their experiences, which I find fascinating, because it's this reconciliation that is almost necessary for for who these characters are, and for what they need to do. We're ending a story where several characters have to realize, they can essentially break this cycle of being taken over by the Master, and being forced into basically servitude, basically something that isn't their own right, but it is an interesting, again, it becomes an interesting thing, as you hear who these people, you really have to see who these people are, and the lengths they'll go to essentially save themselves, because that's what they do here. They save themselves from the Master, and from his basically from his evil plan, so they can eventually figure out really what do they want. What do they want for themselves, for their lives, for everything, basically for everything, which I think is just a good, really, really good way of telling this story, is to have that as the as sort of the plot. That's what everything kind of builds up to. It's something really, really, it becomes something really, really nice and really, really interesting, and you get to see, you get to see what the characters can be, what they can do, and who they are. Peter Davison as the Doctor is great, and he actually has this great chemistry with Jeffrey Beavers. Which is interesting, because Davison's Doctor on television was Anthony Ainley, and that was a fairly strong relationship between the two actors, as Ainley appeared in many Fifth Doctor stories, and not just, say, one or two, because so you have something have something such a different relationship here with Geoffrey Beevor's master, that you really do get to see, okay, this is something new, something different, and something exciting, something that I can definitely get behind and see people really, really latching on to in this story, because it does end up telling the story of the Doctor and the Master, and their essential, I guess, fight to have their survival and everything. And I really, really like to see what is being done. The characters are so interesting, and we end with, obedience becomes such a good theme here, that the title, "And You Will Obey Me," which could have been just a silly gimmick and a silly reference to the Master, actually means something actually really, really good. So overall, I'm going to have to give part 4 of "And You Will Obey Me" a 9 out of 10. That being said, we added the scores and averaged them out to give "And You Will Obey Me" a final score of 8.5 out of 10, bringing us to the end of the episode. So, thank you everybody for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. As always, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And join me next time when we take a look at one of the few Big Finish audio CDs released for free with a copy of Doctor Who magazine with Doctor Who CUDDLESOME.